I left it full-time employment in the first week of lockdown. Everyone started clapping, and I turned around, I was like, clap for carers, not for people delivering beer, but still, I'll take it. I was one of the people that fell through the cracks, so I didn't get that government support. We literally ran out of cash in November 2020. I remember the day, and I just couldn't sleep. Never planned running a pub. That happened organically. I don't really know how we've done this, but we've made money out of cocking up in a really bad way.
This is the Leeds Business Podcast, and I'm your host, Phil Fraser. This week, we speak to Mark Costello, founder of the Horsforth Brewery. Mark tells us how he's grown the business from a home brewing hobby in his kitchen to a fully-fledged brewery and taproom, the effect of launching the business on the first week of the first lockdown, his successful crowdfunding campaign, and how a Christmas disaster turned into a success. Before we start, I have one simple request. Please hit the follow or subscribe button on the app that you're listening on. That's it. Thank you. Okay, so let's get into what is a really interesting episode. On today's Leeds Business Podcast, we have Mark Costello, founder and owner of Horsforth Brewery. Good afternoon, Mark.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Now, 15 years in finance and working for a building society, and then you decide to launch a brewery. That's a bit odd. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, had a dream when I was a boy that I was going to work in finance and then start my own business, and somehow managed to manifest that despite it not really being on my consciousness. But yeah, I worked in finance and risk departments in the building society world for about 15 years. Did my chartered management accountant whilst there as well, and eventually kind of grew tired of working for somebody else. Had a particularly bad manager at one point that, if I'm honest, made me lose enthusiasm for working for somebody else, and I wanted to be in control of my own destiny at last. So did a couple of, I always liked baking and cooking, and I thought, street food was not quite a thing at that point. So I was like, oh, do you know what? I could maybe do something like pizza or Mexican food or something. And I was always pretty good, but I never felt like I was proper good enough quality to do that. And then stumbled upon home brewing and happened to be pretty good at it. Just happened. So I thought, actually, I could probably sell this, and went on from there.
Okay, so you started brewing at home. And then what? Who were you initially selling that to?
So the first official Horsforth Brewery beer actually was brewed in my kitchen. I had to register my kitchen as a brewery with HMRC, which was fun. And then I had to do 2 batches to fill a cask, and it went to the Horsforth Beer Festival, which no longer exists. So yeah, that was the very first customer. And then basically we did some refurbishments in the house. I had a major hip operation, so it was delayed for a year or so. And there's just some local bars in Horsforth were taking this beer that I brewed in the garage.
Wow!
Which to be fair was pretty decent.
And was there? I mean, people talk about sort of hobbies that then turn into businesses. Did you put a business plan together? Was there a thought behind this? I assume you were still working at the building society while you were doing this.
Yeah, so I think I'm probably pretty bad at making plans. Like, it's not my natural tendency to go, right, I'm going to plan what I'm going to do here. Like, I'll think about it a lot in my head, but I actually did make a plan for this. I didn't make much of a plan when I was working full time, because I did start when I was doing full time, so I was just brewing on a weekend and doing stuff on an evening. So I didn't really have a business plan then, because I didn't need to make any money. I had a relatively well-paid job and didn't need to worry about it making any money. So yeah, I didn't do a business plan then, but then I transitioned to part-time at the building society, and that's when it started to get a little bit more serious, because it needed to stand on its own 2 feet a little bit more, because obviously if I would drop 2 days, lose 2/5 of your salary. And then obviously the idea was leading up to then going full-time. So then I did do a business plan, and we actually got some grant funding as well whilst I was still part-time self-employed to get some bigger kit, and had a unit that we'd moved into in December 2018, I think it was. So we actually had an off-site unit, and come November December 19, I'd ordered the new kit, and it was all kind of in motion.
So in terms of it's interesting you say that. You got grant funding for what was a hobby, or was it a part-time job then? I mean, that's quite strange to get grant funding for something as I use the word in the right sense, not a serious business.
No, that's fair. Actually, do you know what? Until the words came out of my mouth, then I never really thought about it. Like, yeah, it's quite strange, isn't it? Because I was still employed. I had an employment contract and everything. So yeah, it wasn't necessarily a hobby. It was a business that was wiping its feet by that point, but it wasn't paying me a wage. It wasn't paying me anything at all, and I was putting a bit in every now and again. But generally, it was wiping its feet. But like I said, we had the plan in place to get the bigger kit with a bigger unit and go on from there. And it was going to be a full-time endeavour at that point that would employ, one person in the first year and then an additional person after that. So that was the plan.
Talk to us about that inflection point from a part-time sort of side hustle that's breaking even to giving up the proper job and going full-time, because that's a big point for a lot of people when they launch their businesses.
Yeah, and we'll come into it, but it was a bigger decision than I knew at the time. It was something that I'd been thinking about for a long time, and it just got to the point where I wasn't a very good employee. I was able to do good work, but I was part-time. My eye wasn't on the ball, so it's like I need to choose at some point. And actually, my boss, who was really good at the time, did say, you need to decide what you're going to do here. We'd love you to stay, but if you're not going to be full-time, maybe time to go. And I was like, yeah, it is. I was like waiting for the moment to go. And I waited until December 19 to go, to have my notice in. So he let me off for another couple of months, because that was the plan, that I would then leave in March 2020. Like I said, we had the business plan in place. We had a kit in place. We were looking for new venue for the brewery to be located with the bigger kit. And it was all, like I said, this is where it actually hurts a little bit, because I'm not a planner, and I put a lot of thought and effort and time into this plan of what we're going to do. And then I left it full-time employment in the first week of lockdown, which, just kind of ripped up the plan. Because I had a bit of holiday left over, I actually had one Monday of what I was planning to do each week. And then after that, I just went out the window.
Right. So obviously it was almost you were waiting for somebody to push you to make that decision to leave. How did that feel? What was the emotion like when you went, right, shit, this is we're going big boy now. We're going full time with this.
It was quite nerve-wracking, but to be fair, I wasn't waiting. I had made the decision that I was going to go in December 19, but my manager asked me a few months earlier what I was doing.
Right.
And he let me kind of cling on until that point, which was really good of him, because he wanted to move on with his team. But yeah, it was, well, I wasn't too nervous, because like I said, I planned it and I had some reserves saved up from a house sale. So I had some cash in the bank that was my fallback, and that was enough to see me through for 6 months if I didn't do any sales and so on and so on. So it was nerve-wracking, but I was ready for it. And I'm not a full-on risk person, but I realised that I spent a lot of years in risk functions.
Yeah.
And I'm quite risk averse unless I'm really certain. As long as the outcome's not catastrophic.
Okay, so we're March 2020. You've just finished a well-paid full-time job. You've got this business plan in front of you, and then Boris is on the telly. So talk us through that.
It was.
I mean, actually, start with what was the plan, and then what did you do?
So the plan was to get this new kit in place and basically have a little bit of help. I employed a think he was 16 at the time, a 16-year-old lad, just to kind of help with the physical stuff. Brewing is a really physical job on that scale. So, there's a lot to physically do, plus all the business side of stuff as well. So you need a little bit of help there. So I had someone helping me there, and I had someone helping me with the brewing on a contract basis, just because whilst I was part-time, I couldn't brew enough because there's not enough hours in a day. But the plan wasn't really for him to be there, or that role to be there. I was meant to be doing the brewing. And we had a couple of vessels, and it was just going to be knocking out some casks and some bottles to pubs and bottle shops, and just kind of find my feet. I'm sometimes humble enough to know that I don't know everything. So I've not run a business at that point. I hadn't run a business before, so I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to get ahead of my skis and mess it all up. I just wanted to take it quite conservatively, figure the lay of the land, and then take it from there. And we haven't done that at all. We've gone completely opposite. Yeah. So when all the lockdowns and stuff happened, it was hard, mainly at the time, because I knew a lot of our customers and I knew them on a very friendly basis. So we didn't know what was going to happen to all these businesses. And the people that had worked for a lot of years, they just saw it as their business is just gone. Like, they're not going to survive this. And that was really hard emotionally, to see that happen, because you've just seen all the people that you've been building this relationship with for 2 years or so, and their world's just crumbling apart. And then you go see the next person, and it's the same thing happening again, where the whole thing's just falling apart. And so that was really hard. I then got shielded, which made it really tricky, because at that point you didn't know how you caught COVID. So I was told to not even go in the back garden, which was far from ideal. But eventually, as we learn a little bit more, I was able to get out of the house and do stuff, because you just realise it'd be fine. And it's actually, business was pretty good then, if I'm honest. Everyone just got really drunk at home. Like I did. And I was out. The only vehicle we had was a VW Polo at that point. That was my delivery van. And I was filling it 3 or 4 times a day to go out. And then that'd be 1 day a week, and then maybe 2 days a week. And it was just, the beer was going quicker than we could brew it, which was amazing. I was like, right, lockdown's a bit rubbish, but I'm having a bit of fun. I got clapped at 8 o'clock because I just dropped some beer off, and then everyone started clapping, and I turned around, I was like, clap for carers, not for people delivering beer, but still.
No, you're an essential worker. You're an essential worker during lockdown.
I literally was. So I took a little bit of credit there. I thought that was nice. So yeah, that was a good period actually for the business, and you didn't know where the world was going. That was the main issue at that point. You're selling a lot of beer, but you don't know when shops are going to open again. You didn't know when pubs are going to open.
So who were you delivering to? Who were your clients at that point?
They were just people at home, mainly.
Right. So you were doing home delivery. You were like the Tesco of beer.
Yeah. So you could kind of, the timeline is obviously a little bit blurry now, but you could kind of see that something was going to happen. And I managed to get our web shop up and running the day before he shut pubs, because I thought something's going to happen here. I was like, well, I need to make some money, so I did that. And yeah, we just then did home deliveries for a few months, probably.
I assume that generates cash flow for you. It generates product and maybe some learnings as to the brewing and that sort of thing. So
yeah,
what was coming out of COVID like for you?
Awful.
And how did that change your perspective of the business?
Coming out of COVID was really hard, if I'm honest. It was awful.
Why do you say that?
People didn't really know what they could do, what they wanted to do. The flip-flopping of restrictions just confused people, and a lot of people just stayed at home. By that point, we'd actually moved into the new premises as well. So we had a bigger premises, bigger rent. We had a couple more members of staff than I thought that we'd have, because we were doing so much beer and products that we just literally needed more people on hand. And then you had the distancing rule. So yes, we were open in April 21 at the taproom, but you couldn't get many people in because you had to keep 2 meters apart. So you were open, and I was one of the people that fell through the cracks. So I didn't get that government support. We had some competitors like locally that got 20, 30, 40 grand in grants. And I was like, that'd be really handy right now. And so yeah, it was. I remember the first time we literally ran out of cash in November 2020. I remember the day, and I just couldn't sleep at that point because it just went.
So what happened?
In terms of how did we fix it, or
Well, how did it manifest itself, and how did it feel, and what did you do to get out of it?
I made the mistake of, I believe a lot of people do, and I overhired staff. If I'm honest, we were doing really well, and I expected that to continue. And then as the rules were chopping and changing, it just killed any momentum. So we were fighting to get the beer out there, but it's like people just weren't buying as much, and our expenses were a lot higher than they should have been. So I think actually it might have been November 21. I can't remember. We ran out. I can't remember the first time we ran out of cash. It was definitely November time. But yeah, that was awful. That felt like I'd failed at that point, if I'm honest, because a big part of the periphery of my old job was liquidity risk management. So I was in a lot of sub-board committees for years about making sure we have enough cash, and I'd run out of cash. And you think, how have I done that? But then you bounce back. You bounce back, and the way I got out of that one was I did a sale on the web shop, and I told people I run out of cash. I was like, we need some cash, and people supported us.
Brilliant. I mean, sorry, not brilliant, but that's nice. That's nice it's nice that you got that commitment from your customers, that they go, right, hang on, we need to do this.
Yeah.
Can I just go back one step? Obviously, we've talked about brewing.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned the new premises, and you mentioned the tap room. So just firstly, give us a plug for the address so people know where they can come. But also, was that the plan, or was it just going to be brewing? How did that come about?
Yeah, so it's on New Roadside in Horsforth, number 143. Not that means an awful lot on a high street, but we're down in the basement, so you have to find us. So I always said to people, just Google us, and you'll find us on Google. It's a lot easier. We've got a million signs outside, and people still can't find us. So Google's away. Well, if I figure that out, then I think we're sorted. How to get people to find us. Yeah, and it wasn't the plan. If I'm honest, it wasn't the plan. My plan was never to run a pub. I always thought that the brewery might get to the point where it would own a pub, but I wouldn't. We'd be big enough that I wouldn't be running it. Somebody else would be running it. And it happened mainly because we lost a load of customers in COVID. So, a lot of places shut. A lot of places stopped buying beer. If they just moved away from beer because it wasn't worth it for them, and we needed cash. And people liked what we did. We had a monthly tap room at the old brewery, and they liked what we did there. And the idea was that the new one, it'd be monthly, maybe bi-monthly. I don't know. And then it just went, well, actually, we need the cash. People like it. We get a better margin on the products. And if I'm brutally honest, there's a few people in the local area that did support us that then ditched us once we moved to this bigger location, because I don't know if it's jealousy or what, but they weren't happy that we kind of moved from a tiny little unit into a bigger premises with a brighter future. So we lost a few customers that way. So we just did it, just went for it. And now we've run a bar pub for 3.5 years nearly.
Right. Okay. So what are the different stress points and opportunities and problems between being a brewer and having a tap room and in effect running a pub?
Yeah, hours, if I'm honest. That's one of the big things is we're now, like, the building is in use from 8 a.m. till midnight, like 5 days a week, and then a weekend. The brewery side's not in use on a weekend, but that's a long stretch. So I'm always contactable, most hours of the waking day, which can be quite hard sometimes. I've got a young boy, so that makes life a little bit tricky because I'm needed on two different sides at different points. So, thankfully we can mitigate that by having good quality staff, which we do. But you're still always needed, and you're always on call, and that makes it quite tricky. And then, like, if you get sickness and stuff, the amount of long days I've done, 8 a.m. till midnight days, doing both jobs. And like I say, it's a physical job. You're not sat at a laptop sorting stuff out. So anything that you're doing just stops you from, I don't know, doing payroll or advertising or building the wider sales. So you're kind of stuck in this physical side. That's one of the biggest stresses. Massive learning curve. Like I said, I'd planned running the brewery. I'd never planned running a pub. That happened organically. So that just, I don't know what you've got to do. I've learned it as I've gone. I'm still learning as well. There's still a few bits that we probably should brush up on, but we've now got a fully functioning bar, which wasn't the plan initially.
Right. Okay. We're recording this. What day is it? Thursday. The Thursday after the Euros final. So what was it? What was it like in the tap room for the match?
Again, I actually didn't even go to the tap room, which is awful. Again, this is part of the having a family thing. My partner is a big football fan, and we've got a little boy who has a mild interest in football. And I was like, I couldn't leave her and him and go watch the football at the tap room. I'd feel awful for them. And we've got a team that can organise it, so that's fine. But I've heard it was really good. Yeah, I said if we won, I was going to go and join them for a party afterwards because it'd be late, but we didn't. So, but yeah, we set up. We had 2 big projectors and a TV outside and another TV. So, in our space, I think we got about 80 people for the final, which that's pretty full for us.
Right.
We ain't getting any more people in, really. Not sat down. If they stood up mingling, you can get a lot more, but sat down, you ain't getting anyone else in. So we're pretty busy for it, which is really good. And we get a really nice clientele as well. So, you're not having lads taking the top off, slinging pint glasses and patio chairs and what have you. It's quite nice. Right.
So generally has the Euros seen a big increase in consumption from what you're seeing?
I don't know if I'd say big. It's definitely had an increase, but what it's done is it makes the other days a lot quieter because people are. Last week was a brilliant example. It was a really busy week, but Wednesday, for example, was booming because England played. Thursday, we were full, but everyone was hungover, so they didn't really spend anything. And then Friday we had a different event, so it's a completely different crowd, really busy. And then Saturday was a bit subdued ahead of Sunday, which was really busy. So net, yeah, great, but it's not like, oh my God, you've done double. It's incremental, which we knew. Like, we showed the Euros when we first opened 3 years ago, and after we lost that final, that was really strange. It was a turning point with the business. We just plummeted after that. Like, some people left after that final, and we've never seen them again. And that was a really strange thing that I just still can't wrap my head around. Thankfully, that's already not happened. We've already had a decent week. So.
In terms of the business, from a turnover and a profit point of view, what's the split between the tap room and bars, restaurants, pubs, bottle shops, that type of thing?
You're looking at about 2/3 tap room and then a third external.
Okay.
But because they're the same business and we're so small, we don't do a transfer pricing. I think if you were to switch it so the tap room did buy the beer off the brewery, I think it'd be about 50-50. Because obviously the tap room's got to buy beer from somewhere.
Right.
So if you did that, that's what it'd be. But yeah, it's more skewed towards a tap room.
And just as a general point, how does a brewery get their beer in a bar or a restaurant or a pub? Is it just door knocking and phone calls? I mean, because obviously you go in any bar, any restaurant, any pub, they have a multitude of products in there, and you ring up and say, "Do you want to take ours as well?" How does that side of the industry work?
I don't know. If I figure it out, I'll probably be a lot wealthier. Yeah, it's a variety of ways. So there's a bit of door knocking. You definitely have to go knock on some doors, and that's something that takes a lot of time. So I've not done an awful lot of that. But what I've tended to do is try and build a bit of a network of small businesses that you're friendly with, and we can help them, because if they don't know much about beer, we can try and educate them and teach them how to serve beer and everything like that. And from that, you organically they would go, well, we'll buy the beer from you because you've helped us out. Twitter was actually where we started our sales. We would get 90% of our sales from Twitter. I had a bit of a Twitter presence, not that it wasn't massive, but in beer Twitter world, I was on there, and that got us some sales. Twitter's dead now. Like, I'd say we'd get 0% of our sales coming from Twitter. We get a bit from Instagram. We get nothing from Facebook on the trade side, but Instagram you get a little bit. But it's word of mouth, knocking on doors, and trying to just kind of build that, like I said, build that network. So we've got someone who we're quite friendly with, and they're going to open a place up and put our beer on because we're friendly with them. That happens a lot. If you're a big boy, a really big boy, you go into a bar and go, "We'll give you £20,000 if you sell our beer," and then the pub or bar will go, "Okay," because why wouldn't you do that for £20,000?
Right. So that's the way it works. That's the way the industry works.
Yeah. So we have to fight. It sounds really bad, actually, but we have to fight for the scraps. The big boys, your Heineken and so on, they own the majority of the keg taps that are in pubs, and you can't get on them. You're legally not allowed, because the pub will be legally signed up in a contract to buy product from Heineken or Molson Coors or whatever. So we get often in a pub, we're only allowed on the cask, the hand pulls, and they'll just have a rotating guest line that we get on from time to time. But then your smaller venues are less likely to have that big contract with a big brewery. So that's where we're more likely to get on. So if you've got a small restaurant, a small bar, they might have had a bit of an install from a big brewery, but they might say, well, we want to support local, so we need to have 4 of the 10 lines available to do what we want to do with. And that's the model that we try and push to people, because let's be honest, if a big brewery is going to give you a load of money, I'm not going to give you a load of money. I haven't got that kind of money to put into you. I'm not going to tell somebody to turn down a big chunk of cash, especially in the current climate. I just say, can you just make sure there's a couple of lines for us, and I'll give you some glasses.
Okay, so if anybody's listening in the local area, they've got a bar or a pub or a restaurant or a bottle shop, and they want to support a local brewer, give Mark a shout. All the details will be in the show notes, so you'll be able to contact Mark, and also there'll be full details as how to get the tap room as well. And if you go to the bar and mention my name, Mark won't give you a discount. He'll just smile at you.
Might even do that. Might not.
He might not even smile. Actually, that leads me. This we could fit this into the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal, could we? So there's 2 parts to the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. Part number 1.
I saw where you were going there.
Part number 1 is I bring you interesting, inspirational, and motivational guests, totally for free, and free beer, like Mark Costello. And you viewer and listener, you have 2 things to do as you're part of the fair deal. Part number 1 recommend this podcast to one other person that you think will get benefit from it. And part number 2, I want you to write a review of the podcast, either on the Apple Podcasts app or at podchaser.com. So there you go. That's the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal, which may or may not include free beer as well. How's that sound, Mark?
Sounds amazing. Although I do feel every time I listen to the podcast, I think, do I have to do that every week?
Yes!
Do I every week? All right, I'll try.
Every single week. You can put a note in the tap room. Listen to this episode, so everybody who comes in can listen to it. Okay, now you were recently in the Yorkshire Post.
Yes,
you wrote an article all about raising money. So tell us how that came about and why you did it.
The raising the money or the article?
Well, both.
Raising the money first. That's where it starts, I guess, isn't it? So we raised a bit of money earlier this year to buy a canning machine. We've had our previous canning machine for nearly 4 years. Got a grant for it back in COVID days. There's a theme here. In COVID, they basically said, you need some money and you've already drawn down on some. Can you buy a canning machine or something? So we did. Anyway, that was 4 years ago. This canning machine it's basically a big expenditure. It was 42 grand for this canning machine, which is, for us, is a big chunk of cash. Given the history that we've had with coming out of COVID, we haven't been able to build that kind of reserve up to invest in a canning machine. For years, people have been asking me to do a crowdfunder, which I'm just convinced that they wanted some good value rewards and cheap beer out of it. I think that's pretty much what they wanted. Or they would say that they really wanted to support what we're doing and can see how hard it's been and wanted to see us grow. And I've always kind of kept the gunpowder dry on it just because I didn't know where we would actually get the bang for the buck. Like, there's a few projects that we've done over years and I'm like, we could self-fund that and what have you. And this one was just a bit too big. So I thought, right, we can actually get a grant for this as well. We organised that last year that we could get a grant for a canning machine as part of the Made Smarter project from the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. If anyone wants that, I'm more than happy to share the details of the people to get in contact with, because it's just an amazing scheme. It's 50% match funded up to 20 grand. So out of that 42 that we spent, we got £20,000 grant. And then we got we raised 25 grand in the crowdfunder as well. So that pretty much paid for the canning machine. And the canning machine it's kind of A grade machine for a brewery our size. The quality of the cans that we can now produce is just a lot better. I don't want to slag off the old machine too much because I'm still trying to sell it. But it's an entry-level machine. And there's a reason it doesn't cost 42 grand. It's a lot cheaper than that. And this is just everything it does is just focused on the quality of the product that's in the can. So we've got a longer shelf life, we've got a better product, and it's like 6 times as fast if you actually look at it as man hours. So it's an absolute game changer for the business. And I thought, we need to do this. We're not going to get to the next level if we can't get a good can product. Is either finish doing cans altogether or actually make that move and do it properly. The reason I wrote the article, I've just recently started working with Colin Glass, who actually introduced me to this podcast. I started working with him at the start of the year, and he passed on, I think, just from yourself, actually, wasn't it? Saying that there's an opportunity to write some articles in the Yorkshire Post. And I thought, he asked me if I wanted to do it. I said, yeah, why not? I'm pretty good at writing long, rambling posts on Facebook. So if I could make that a little bit more cohesive, I might be able to do a newspaper article. And I did, which I thought was pretty cool, actually. I've never done that before. And it's now up on the wall in the brewery.
There you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
So,
okay. You mentioned I was going to say, you mentioned Colin. He's been a guest on the show. There'll be a link to his interview in the show notes on here. what we've just been talking about actually leads into your how-to,
Yes.
doesn't it? You're gonna tell us how to do a crowdfunding campaign. So talk us through it.
Yeah. So, like I say, we've had people who wanted to support our crowdfunder for a number of years, and I think for us that was the key, that we'd built that support base. Don't necessarily want to use the word fan base. That sounds a bit weird for a brewery, but support base of retail customers that liked our story and understood where we're coming from, and we kind of nurtured that for a number of years. So they wanted to support us, which I think is actually the key for the crowdfunder to get off the ground. There's a lot of people would say that you need to have 20% like ready, like people lined up ready to go, like friends and family. I don't have friends and family that are going to give us that kind of cash. Like, if I, in that way. To be fair, a lot of them actually did put that some cash in, so that was great. But do you know what I mean? I didn't feel comfortable saying, "Can you directly to people? Can you do this?" But we did lead up to saying, "Right, we're going to do a crowdfunder." So basically, get ready, because we're going to do it, and that just kind of, I wouldn't say built the excitement, because it's still quite a dry subject, but it definitely built the awareness that we're going to do it over a number of weeks. And I then got to the point of, right, we're now ready, we're going to do it, we're going to go live at this time on this day. So then people were ready and waiting. Rather annoyingly, the button on the website to launch it didn't work for a few hours. I was ready. I told people 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, whatever time it was, it's going to go. I just kept pressing the button and it didn't work. And then I was getting messages like, I've not seen it, it's not gone live yet. So you've got to build that kind of, people generally were asking, why isn't it live? I'm like, because the button's not working. It was nothing, like, just one of those glitches. So yeah, you've got to build that kind of fan base originally, and then build the awareness that you're going to do the crowdfunding in the first place. Where we probably fell down a little bit, and this is where getting some external help I've seen will definitely help, is getting that momentum, keeping the momentum going. So we had a massive burst. We hit our target in a matter of days, but then we didn't have any more ideas of how to keep it going. But we had a worth saying as well, have a target in mind of how much you want and how much you need, because we went down the reward based on crowdfunding, not the equity. So, for example, someone pledged £100, we'd give them £125 in the taproom to spend. I don't know what the number is, but something like that. Obviously, that means that if they're coming and spending £125 in the taproom, we're not getting £125. That's already gone on the machine. So cash flow wise, we've been prepared for that squeeze on cash flow in the last 4 months that we've had to happen, because you're just not going to get that cash coming in. So we didn't want to go too high. I didn't want to raise £40,000 because I wouldn't really have anything to do with it, but I'm sure it would find a way to disappear. And then suddenly we've got a £40,000 hole in our cash flow that we need to fill somehow. So you've got to make sure you know what you want and what you need. And we actually got exactly what we wanted and needed at 25. But you see some people who will come out with a fresh wave of rewards and things like that to keep the momentum going, and could come up with cool ways of advertising it again in cool videos and stuff. We didn't get any external help on our crowdfunder, and that's probably where if we wanted to get more, we probably would have needed that. I'm not a marketeer. I'm okay at it, but I'm not a marketeer. Getting someone involved would get you over that line to get some more. So yeah, that's where we definitely fell down. But then it's that expectation as well. That you've got to prepare yourself mentally. When you're doing your crowdfunder, you are going to get that big boost, but you're going to get that big drop off. 4 or 5 days in of a 4-week process, it's just going to trickle along, and you've got to get ready for that so you don't panic. And then you go, right, the last couple of days, it'll go over and it'll go up, and you'll probably be fine. But you still got to keep that in people's minds, keep we don't put a lot of advertising out there, but we keep nudging on Facebook and what have you and emails and Instagram, just keeping people's awareness.
It's interesting you mentioned that. Just to clarify, this was a crowdfunder, and you didn't give people equity. You gave them rewards, as in
Correct.
In effect, vouchers to spend.
Yeah.
In the tap room, in the brewery, etc., etc.
Yeah. 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 I just felt like doing an equity one. Sometimes breweries have a bit of a bad history with equity crowdfunders. There's some that haven't gone particularly well. I've invested in some over the years. There was a point where if you wanted to look at the next brewery to fold, just look at who I've done a crowdfunder with, and they'll probably go. Thankfully, that trend seems to have stopped, which is good. But yeah, I just didn't want to have that responsibility for people that they actually own something, and if it all goes wrong, they've lost everything. The way they've done it, they will get a reward for this. And if I'm perfectly honest, there's a lot of admin involved with having other shareholders that we're just not ready for. I wasn't ready for the hundreds of people to own shares in the brewery in terms of how I would communicate to them and stuff. That's beyond us at the moment.
There you go. So if anybody's interested in raising a crowdfunder for their business, there's some tips from Mark.
Yeah, again, people can reach out as well. I'm more than happy to talk about it with people. I have done already to a few.
Yeah, sure. And I assume the crowdfunder is now closed.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Now, tell us your Christmas disaster story, because I know people love bad news stories.
Yeah, that was a bad time in the business. There's been a few low points that particularly stick in your mind, and then you have moments, don't you, where you think, oh, this is tough. I'm going to remember this, and you don't. I do remember this Christmas. So it must have been Christmas of 21, I think. The prior year, we'd done a 12 beers of Christmas box. It went down phenomenally well. Like, we had probably the best ever day that we've still had as a brewery, and we're a different beast now to what we were. Just selling these boxes and couldn't sell enough. Brilliant. Next year, we'll do it again. Amazing. We had some momentum behind us. We could do it, and we did it. We sold a lot of beer, and then it's probably a week before Christmas. So you know that some people have bought these for themselves, and they would have drunk the beer and they'd been fine. But then some people have bought them at the start of December for Christmas presents. So the week before, I realised that there's a beer in there that has gone bad. And it was a failing in our process that someone did something they shouldn't do. And I didn't know that had happened. I was like, damn it. Oh, well. There's only one beer out of 12. Like, we'll fix that, no problem. I'll just try some others. And I can't remember if it was 5 or 6 of 12 beers that had gone bad from something we had done to the beer. Wasn't dangerous, thankfully, but it just meant that the beer was just not nice. It was oxidized, basically, and oxygen in beer is bad. You don't want oxygen in beer. And I worked it out, and because it was so close to Christmas, and we weren't going to be able to replace any sales that we had, we just basically had to refund or give replacements where possible, but we were low on stock. It was about 12 grand's worth of beer, which for us, that's a serious wedge of our revenue. I don't really mind talking about revenue too much, even though we're private, but it's like 5% of our revenue at the time, just before Christmas. And I don't know if you've ever had it where you just feel like you're just going to fall down. I just felt like I was going to fall and go into a ditch, and I just remember being dizzy, and I just walked out. It wasn't the greatest leadership moment I've ever had, but I just had to leave, and I just went around the corner and I just sat down, and I was too numb to cry. I couldn't even cry. I just don't know what to do. And then you pull yourself together and you go, right, what are we going to do? And the only thing I could do is say to people, I'm really sorry. Like, front up, really sorry. We've messed up. You've got some beer that has gone off, basically. If you had it at the start of December, you'd be fine. But if you haven't, come bring it back. We'll replace it. Or we'll deliver it where we can. And that actually turned out to be amazing because people did come and collect their replacements, but then they bought more beer. I'm sure someone spent like £100, £200 on more beer. And I was just like, I don't really know how we've done this, but we've made money out of cocking up in a really bad way. Like, really, that's the worst I've ever felt. And we somehow turned it into a win. And I still don't really understand how or why we did it. Like, I don't know why people went, oh yeah, here's some more money. Like, I mean, the beer was fine. Hopefully the beer was fine that they had as a replacement. It would better have been. I didn't hear it wasn't. But yeah, that was genuinely one of the lowest moments of running the brewery and in a space of a few days, turned it around into a bit of a euphoric high, to be fair, because it got resolved.
Wow, that's brilliant.
But that's what you do, isn't it? That's what you do. Like, when you're small like us, like you just got to do that, and that's part of the support that we've got.
Yeah.
I'm not going to hide. You do see a lot of businesses are quite faceless. Like, I don't put my literal face on all of our social media posts and what have you, but people know that I'm a real person, and they don't see me driving around in a really fancy car and pleading poverty. It's like, if I'm pleading poverty, it's because we haven't got any money, and it's genuine. I'd love to be driving around in a Ferrari, maybe, but people do see what we are, and we're genuine people, and they see, if they come for a drink in the tap room, they'll see us slaving away in the brewery.
That's a great story. And I think the moral of that is, in business, if you hold your hands up and say, look, really sorry, I've messed up.
Yeah.
Most people will accept that and go, okay, fair enough. We all mess up.
Yeah.
It's how you deal with it that's actually the important thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that I try and instill in the team. I'm more than happy for people to make mistakes, as long as it doesn't cost us an absolute fortune. But even then, it's like, it was a mistake. It wasn't something malicious. It's just don't do it again and own up to it. And it is something that I really try and instill with the team, is that I don't want them to be afraid of making mistakes. I'd rather they do something. Someone once told me, and it stuck in my head, show me someone that's never made a mistake, and I'll show you someone that's never done anything in their life.
That's a great thought to end on. But before we do end, every guest gets to give a shout out to another Leeds business. So, Mark, who are you going to give a shout out to?
I'm going to give it to Joe and Stu from the Swine That Dines restaurant, which I don't know if you've been.
I haven't.
But if you haven't, go. It's genuinely one of the best restaurants in the city. And they're just about to, they've recently done a crowdfunding as well, because they're going to open a second site. I don't think I can say where it is, but it's going to be in town, in the centre of Leeds. But yeah, it's a bit of a hidden gem in the sense that not many people know about it, but you really should. Stu is genuinely a phenomenal chef, and some of the stuff that you'll eat there just blows your mind at how good it is. It's not, super fine, delicate dining. It's good, really hearty food. And I'd love to give them a shout out, just because I think with their new place opening, I think it'd be great if they can open with a bang.
Okay, there you go. So Swine, I've heard of the Swine at Dines, but I've never eaten there, so I might have to try it out.
Make the effort, worth it.
Do they sell Horsforth beer?
Not yet.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So I tell you what, I won't publish this until they do. How about that? That's got a bit of leverage there for you.
Yeah. All right. Well, if we're going to cut this bit, then they are going to in the new site. They are going to in the new site, but I don't think I'm allowed to say that yet. So.
Right. Okay. All right. So top secret.
Yeah.
So by the time this goes out, they probably will. So
yeah.
Mark, it's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me, Phil. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you found it interesting, inspiring, and of use. To make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes, please subscribe to the show. Go on, do it now. Do it now before you go off and do something else. Thank you. Much appreciated. Oh, and don't forget our fair deal. See you next week.